There are places on Earth where the planet itself becomes an enemy, not metaphorically, literally, where the air will kill you, where the ground will poison you, where the temperature will strip the skin from your body in minutes. These are not remote in the way a forest is remote. These are places where human biology simply stops working, where survival is not about skill or preparation, it is about how quickly you can leave. Drop a comment right now telling us where you are watching from and what the current temperature is outside your window. We want to see the range, because the place at number 1 recorded a temperature so extreme that it broke the standard meteorological scale, not centuries ago, within the last decade. 15 locations, 6 continents, every one of them documented by scientific teams, meteorological agencies, or researchers who went there specifically to measure how hostile a place can actually become. Number 15, Dalal Afar region, Ethiopia. The hottest inhabited place on Earth in terms of year-round average temperature. Not a single day of relief, not a cool season, just relentless suffocating heat that averages 34.4 degrees Celsius annually. That is the average. The highs go far beyond that. In 1960, temperatures here reached 46 degrees Celsius daily for 41 consecutive days. The ground itself is a toxic landscape of sulfur springs, acid pools, and salt formations that look like another planet. The colors are vivid: greens, yellows, reds, beautiful in photographs, deadly up close. The springs are not hot springs in the therapeutic sense. They are highly acidic, pH levels low enough to burn skin on contact. The air around them carries hydrogen sulfide and chlorine gas. Breathing deeply here is not recommended. Breathing at all requires care. The Afar people live on the edges of this region, mining salt in conditions that would break most industrial safety standards anywhere else on Earth. They work in the early mornings, leave before midday, and return only when the sun begins to drop. Even then, the heat does not really fade, it just becomes survivable. Dalal sits in the Danakil Depression, one of the lowest and hottest places on the planet. The entire region is a rift zone where 3 tectonic plates are slowly tearing apart. The Earth here is thin. The heat is not just atmospheric, it is geological, it rises from below. Researchers from the University of Bologna studied the area extensively and confirmed what locals already knew. Dalal is not a place where humans are meant to stay. At least Dalal has people who have adapted to its edges. The next place has no permanent population at all. Number 14, the Danakil Desert, Eritrea and Ethiopia. Technically part of the same rift system as Dalal but spread across a far larger and even more unforgiving expanse. Temperatures regularly exceed 50 degrees Celsius. There is almost no rainfall. What little water exists is trapped in salt flats or geothermal features too toxic to drink. The ground is covered in jagged salt crusts that reflect the sun back into your face, doubling the heat load. There is no shade. There are no trees, there is nothing to break the light or the wind, which, when it does blow, carries sand hot enough to burn exposed skin. This is one of the few places on Earth where daytime surface temperatures can reach 70 degrees Celsius. That is not air temperature. That is the ground itself. Step on it without proper footwear and you will not stand for long. The Afar people traverse this desert as part of ancient salt caravan routes, but they do so with extreme caution, traveling at night and resting during the day in temporary shelters that offer minimal relief. Expeditions into the Danakil require armed escorts, not because of the terrain but because of regional instability. But even if the politics were stable, the environment itself would still be prohibitive. Dehydration happens faster here than almost anywhere else on Earth. Sweat evaporates before it can cool you. Your body loses water faster than you can replace it, even if you're drinking constantly. After a few hours, cognitive function begins to decline. After a day, organ failure becomes a real risk. National Geographic and the BBC have both sent teams here. Both required extensive medical support, prepositioned water supplies, and evacuation plans. Neither stayed longer than necessary. The Danakil does not negotiate. At least the Danakil is dry. The next place will drown you in humidity while it cooks you alive. Number 13, Lut Desert, Iran, officially the hottest surface temperature ever recorded on Earth. In 2005, NASA satellites measured a ground temperature of 70.7 degrees Celsius in the Gandambarian region of the Lut. That record was later challenged by Death Valley, but the Lut holds multiple years in the top rankings. This is not a one-time anomaly. This is a place that consistently reaches temperatures incompatible with exposed human life. The Lut spans over 51,000 square kilometers. Much of it is covered in dark volcanic rock, which absorbs and radiates heat with brutal efficiency. Other sections are vast fields of sand dunes, some of them reaching heights of 300 meters. The wind sculpts the sand into ridges called yardongs, formations so sharp and alien they have been compared to Mars. There is no vegetation, no animals, no insects. In the core of the Gandambarian there is no life at all. Not even bacteria. Scientists from the Iranian Space Agency and multiple universities have confirmed this. The heat sterilizes the ground. Travelers who cross the Lut do so only in winter, and even then they move quickly. There are no roads, no reliable water sources. Navigation is difficult because the landscape constantly shifts. Dunes move, landmarks disappear. GPS is essential, but even that is not enough if your vehicle breaks down. In summer, rescue operations are nearly impossible. Helicopters struggle with the heat. Ground vehicles overheat. The few people who have ventured into the Lut during peak summer describe it as standing inside an oven with the door closed. The Lut does not kill quickly, it kills methodically. Heat exhaustion, heat stroke, organ failure, death in that order, usually within 6 hours. The Lut will cook you from the outside in. The next place will freeze you from the inside out. Number 12, Verkhansk, Sakha Republic, Russia, one of the coldest permanently inhabited places on Earth. Winter temperatures regularly drop below -50°C. The record low recorded in 1892 was -67.8°C. At that temperature, exposed skin freezes in under 2 minutes, breath freezes in the air before it dissipates, metal becomes brittle, plastic shatters, rubber cracks. Verkhansk has a population of around 1,300 people. They live in wooden houses with walls thick enough to hold heat. But even that is not always enough. During the coldest weeks, people stay indoors as much as possible. Schools close, outdoor work stops, the town essentially hibernates. Food is stored frozen outside because refrigerators are unnecessary. The entire environment is a freezer. What makes Verkhansk particularly extreme is not just the cold, it is the temperature range. In summer, temperatures can reach 37°C. That gives Verkhansk one of the largest temperature ranges of any inhabited place on Earth, over 100°C between seasonal extremes. The human body is not built to adapt to that kind of swing. Residents suffer from chronic respiratory issues, joint pain, and a host of cold-related health problems that persist even during the brief warm months. The town sits in a valley which traps cold air during the winter. There is no wind to disperse it. The cold just settles and stays. Meteorologists from the Russian Academy of Sciences have studied the region extensively. Their conclusion is blunt: Verkhansk is habitable only because humans are stubborn. At least Verkhansk has houses, the next place has nothing but ice. Number 11, Oymyakon, Sakha Republic, Russia, often cited as the coldest permanently inhabited place on Earth, rivaling Verkhansk for that title. The official record low is -67.7°C, recorded in 1933. Unofficial reports from residents claim it has gone lower, but temperatures that extreme are difficult to measure accurately because standard thermometers stop working. Oymyakon has a population of around 500. The name translates roughly to unfrozen patch of water, a reference to a nearby thermal spring that remains liquid even in winter. That spring is one of the only reasons the area was ever inhabited. It provided water for reindeer herders traveling through the region. Over time, a permanent settlement formed. Now it is a town that exists in defiance of basic human biology. Cars are left running all day during winter because if you turn the engine off, it will not start again without a blowtorch to thaw the fuel lines. Batteries die within minutes. Glasses freeze to your face. If you wear metal-framed glasses outside, the frames will cold burn your skin. Food is sold frozen in outdoor markets because there is no need for refrigeration. Fish are sold whole, frozen solid, and customers carry them home like blocks of wood. The ground is permafrost down to depths of 1,500 meters. Nothing can be buried. Graves are dug with jackhammers and explosives. Pipework is impossible, so there is no central plumbing. Outhouses are standard even in public buildings. Residents drink melted ice and snow. Laundry is done indoors and hung to dry in living spaces because anything hung outside will freeze solid in seconds. Oymyakon is not a survival challenge, it is a permanent survival situation every single day. If you are still here, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. The rest of this list does not get easier. A desert that has not seen rain in centuries, a valley that kills everything that enters it, a region so dry that nothing decays, and the place at number 1 where the cold is so extreme that researchers can only stay for minutes at a time, even with the best equipment on Earth. Number 10, McMurdo Dry Valleys, Antarctica, the driest place on Earth, not a desert in the traditional sense, a polar desert where it has not rained in over 2 million years. The valleys cover about 4,800 square kilometers and are almost entirely free of ice and snow, despite being in Antarctica. The reason is the katabatic winds, which blow down from the polar plateau at speeds exceeding 320 kilometers per hour. These winds are so dry and so cold that they evaporate ice on contact. No moisture accumulates, no snow settles. The ground is bare rock, frozen soil, and mummified remains of seals that wandered inland and died centuries ago. The bodies do not decay, there is no moisture for bacteria. The seals lie where they fell, freeze-dried and perfectly preserved. Air here has a relative humidity close to zero. Breathing it feels like inhaling glass. Your throat dries out in minutes, your nasal passages crack and bleed. The cold compounds the problem. Temperatures can drop to minus 60 degrees Celsius, and with the wind chill it feels far worse. Researchers from the United States Antarctic Program work in the dry valleys during the brief summer season, but even then conditions are brutal. There is no liquid water, no vegetation, no insects. No animals. The valleys are as close to sterile as any place on Earth. NASA uses the dry valleys as an analog for Mars. The conditions are similar. The soil chemistry, the lack of water, the extreme temperature fluctuations. If life can survive here, it might survive there. So far, they have found only the hardiest extremophiles, organisms that exist at the very edge of what biology allows. The dry valleys do not kill you quickly, they just make it clear you do not belong. At least the dry valleys are remote. The next place is accessible by road and it still kills people every year. Number 9, Death Valley, California, United States. The hottest air temperature ever reliably recorded on Earth, 56.7 degrees Celsius at Furnace Creek on July 10, 1913. That record has been disputed, but even without it, Death Valley consistently records summer temperatures above 50 degrees Celsius. The valley sits 86 meters below sea level, surrounded by mountains that trap heat and block moisture. It is a natural convection oven. The name is not an exaggeration. People die here regularly. Hikers underestimate the heat, tourists run out of water, cars break down and people try to walk for help, not realizing that in summer walking even a few kilometers in full sun can be fatal. The National Park Service posts warnings everywhere. Drink 1 liter of water per hour. Do not hike after 10 a.m. Stay near your vehicle. People ignore the warnings. Search and rescue teams recover bodies every summer. The ground temperature in Death Valley can exceed 90 degrees Celsius. That is hot enough to cause degree burns. In 2021, a hiker removed his shoes to cool his feet and received severe burns from the sand. He required hospitalization. The air itself is difficult to breathe. It is hot enough that each breath feels like it is cooking your lungs from the inside. Death Valley does have visitors. It has roads, a visitor center, even a resort. But all of that infrastructure exists to make the edges of the valley survivable. Venture into the backcountry during summer and you are in one of the most hostile environments on the planet. The valley does not care that you are only an hour from a paved road. It will kill you just as efficiently as any desert in the Middle East or Africa. Death Valley is hostile, but it is a known quantity. The next place is predictable only in how unpredictable it is. Number 8, Atacama Desert, Chile, the driest non-polar desert on Earth. Some weather stations in the Atacama have never recorded rainfall. Not in years, not in decades, in centuries of recorded observation. The core of the desert in regions around Yungay and Calama receives an average of 1 millimeter of rain per year. Some areas receive none. The ground is salt flats, nitrate deposits, and ancient riverbeds that have been dry for thousands of years. The Atacama sits between the Andes Mountains and the Chilean Coast Range. The two mountain ranges create a double rain shadow, blocking moisture from both the Pacific Ocean and the Amazon basin. The result is a hyperarid environment where nothing grows, nothing rots, and nothing changes. The ground looks the same as it did 1,000 years ago. Footprints left by pre-Columbian peoples are still visible. Spanish colonial-era equipment lies on the surface, untouched by rust or decay because there is no moisture to corrode it. The lack of water makes survival here nearly impossible. There are no natural water sources in the core desert. Travelers must carry everything they need, and even then the margin for error is non-existent. Dehydration happens faster in the Atacama than almost anywhere else because the air is so dry. Sweat evaporates instantly. You do not feel wet. You just feel thirsty, and by the time you realize how thirsty you are already in trouble. NASA uses the Atacama as a testing ground for Mars rovers. The soil chemistry is similar. The lack of organic material, the extreme dryness, the UV exposure. If instruments can function here, they can function on Mars. The European Southern Observatory operates several telescopes in the Atacama because the air is so dry and clear that light pollution is almost non-existent. But the astronomers live in climate-controlled facilities and venture outside only when necessary. The Atacama does not flood, it does not storm, it just waits. The next place does storm, and when it does, nothing survives. Number 7, Mount Washington, New Hampshire, United States, home to some of the most extreme weather on Earth despite being only 1,917 meters tall. The summit holds the record for the highest wind speed ever recorded by a human observer, 372 kilometers per hour, measured on April 12, 1934. That wind speed remained the world record for over 60 years. The mountain sits at the convergence of several major storm tracks, which means weather systems collide directly over the summit. The result is violent, unpredictable, and often deadly. The observatory at the summit is staffed year-round by rotating teams of researchers who live in conditions most people would consider uninhabitable. Winter temperatures regularly drop to -40 degrees Celsius. With wind chill, it has been recorded as low as -78 degrees Celsius. At those temperatures, exposed skin freezes in under a minute. The wind does not stop. It howls constantly, shaking the building, tearing at the structure, making it impossible to stand outside without being knocked over. Hikers attempt to summit Mount Washington every year. Many of them die. The mountain has killed over 150 people since record-keeping began. The weather changes without warning. A clear morning can turn into whiteout conditions within minutes. People become disoriented, hypothermic, and lost within sight of the trail. The mountain is accessible, it has a road, it has a cog railway. None of that matters when the weather turns. The Mount Washington Observatory has documented over 100 days per year with hurricane-force winds. The summit spends more time in clouds than in clear air. Visibility is often zero. The mountain is not remote, it is not high, it is not in the Arctic or the Himalayas. It is in New England, and it has weather more extreme than most peaks twice its height. At least Mount Washington warns you with wind and cold. The next place kills in silence. Number 6. Lake Natron, Tanzania. A salt lake so caustic that it calcifies animals on contact. The water has a pH level that can reach 10.5, approaching the alkalinity of ammonia. The lake sits in the East African Rift and is fed by hot springs rich in sodium carbonate and other minerals. The water temperature can exceed 60 degrees Celsius in some areas. The combination of heat and extreme alkalinity makes the lake one of the most hostile aquatic environments on Earth. Animals that die in or near the lake often become encrusted with sodium carbonate, preserving them in eerie, calcified poses. Photographer Nick Brandt documented these remains in a series of haunting images. Birds, bats, and other small animals, all preserved exactly as they were at the moment of death. The lake does not decompose them, it mummifies them. Despite the hostility, Lake Natron is the primary breeding ground for the lesser flamingo. Millions of flamingos nest on the salt flats surrounding the lake because the extreme conditions keep predators away. The flamingos have evolved to handle the water. Their legs are tough enough to withstand the caustic alkalinity, and they feed on the algae that thrive in the lake's extreme environment. But for anything else, the lake is a death trap. Humans cannot swim in Lake Natron. The water would burn exposed skin and eyes. Drinking it would cause severe internal burns. Wading into it without protection would result in chemical burns within minutes. The smell is overwhelming. Hydrogen sulfide and other gases rise from the lake, creating an odor that visitors describe as nauseating. The ground around the lake is crusted with salt and sharp enough to cut through boots. Lake Natron is beautiful from a distance. The water is a deep red, stained by the algae that live in it, but up close it is clear that this is not a place where life is welcome. The next place does not burn you with chemicals, it suffocates you with heat and salt. Number 5. Afar Depression, Ethiopia. A geological rift zone where the African continent is literally tearing apart. The depression sits at the junction of 3 tectonic plates and the ground is sinking at a rate of 1 to 2 centimeters per year. In a few million years, this will be an ocean. Right now, it is one of the hottest, lowest, and most volcanically active places on Earth. The Afar Depression includes Dalal, the Danakil Desert, and Erta Ale, a shield volcano with a permanent lava lake. The entire region is a furnace. Temperatures regularly exceed 50 degrees Celsius. The air is heavy with sulfur and other volcanic gases. The ground is unstable. Fissures open without warning. Lava flows shift. The salt flats crack and buckle under your feet. The Afar people live here, but they do so by moving constantly. They follow seasonal patterns. Mining salt during the cooler months and retreating to higher ground when the heat becomes unbearable. They travel in caravans with camels, carrying water and supplies, moving only at night when the temperature drops slightly. Even then, the heat is oppressive. There is no relief, no shade, no water that is not heavily salinated or contaminated with volcanic minerals. Researchers who visit the Afar Depression require constant hydration, electrolyte management, and medical monitoring. Dehydration can happen in under an hour. Heat stroke is a constant risk. The logistical challenges of working here are immense. Equipment fails, vehicles overheat, communication is unreliable because the heat distorts radio signals. The Afar Depression is not a place you visit, it is a place you survive long enough to leave. At least the Afar Depression is on solid ground. The next place will sink you into boiling mud. Number 4. Danakil Depression Hydrothermal Fields, Ethiopia. Within the larger Afar Depression lies a concentration of hydrothermal activity so extreme that standing near it is dangerous. Boiling mud pools, acid springs, and geysers that erupt without warning. The ground is thin crust over superheated water and magma. Step in the wrong place and the crust collapses, plunging you into boiling acidic water. The colors are surreal. Bright yellows, greens, oranges, and reds, all created by sulfur, iron, and other minerals dissolved in the water. It looks like an alien world. It smells like rotten eggs. The air is thick with hydrogen sulfide, chlorine gas, and other toxic fumes. Breathing deeply can cause dizziness, nausea, and respiratory distress. Prolonged exposure can cause permanent lung damage. Local guides navigate the area with extreme caution. They know which crusts are stable and which are not. They know where the gases are thickest and where the wind disperses them, but even with experienced guides the risk is constant. The ground shifts. New vents open, old crusts collapse. People have died here, not many because not many people come here, but the few who do take their lives in their hands. Scientific teams from multiple countries have studied the Danakil hydrothermal fields. The extremophile bacteria found here are unlike anything else on Earth. They survive in conditions that would sterilize most environments. Researchers believe that if life exists on other planets, it might resemble what lives here. But studying it requires protective equipment, respirators, and constant vigilance. The Danakil hydrothermal fields are not a tourist destination. They are a research site for scientists willing to risk their health for discovery. The next place does not require a risk assessment, it requires a hazmat suit. Number 3. Dzerzhinsk, Nizhny Novgorod Oblast, Russia, once one of the most polluted places on Earth. A city of 250,000 people living on ground so contaminated that the average life expectancy in the early 2000s was 42 years for men and 47 for women. Dzerzhinsk was a center of Soviet chemical weapons production during the Cold War. Factories produced sarin, VX gas, mustard gas, and other agents designed to kill as efficiently as possible. The waste from those factories was dumped into the ground, into rivers, and into unlined pits that leached toxins into the water table. In 2007, Guinness World Records listed Dzerzhinsk as the most chemically polluted city on Earth. Soil samples contained dioxins and phenols at concentrations thousands of times higher than safe levels. The groundwater was undrinkable. The air smelled of chemicals. Residents reported chronic illness, cancers, birth defects, and respiratory diseases at rates far above the national average. The Russian government has made efforts to clean up Dzerzhinsk, but the contamination is so deep and so widespread that full remediation is nearly impossible. The chemical weapons facilities were closed, but the toxins remain. They are in the soil, in the water, in the foundations of buildings. People still live there because they have nowhere else to go. They drink bottled water. They avoid certain areas. They accept that the place they live is slowly killing them. Environmental scientists from multiple international agencies have studied Dzerzhinsk. Their reports are bleak. The contamination will persist for centuries. Even with aggressive cleanup efforts, the city will remain hazardous for generations. Dzerzhinsk is not a natural disaster. It is a man-made one, a place where human industry created an environment hostile to human life. Dzerzhinsk is toxic, but at least you can leave. The next place will not let you. Number 2. Death Valley, Danakil, and the Lut combined cannot match the sheer sustained lethality of the next location. Not because of heat or cold or toxins. Because of all three combined with isolation so extreme that rescue is not an option. But before that, the place at number 1. The coldest temperature ever recorded on Earth. Not in a valley, not on a mountain, on a plateau so remote that the team who measured it could only stay long enough to confirm the reading and leave before their equipment failed. Number 1. East Antarctic Plateau, Antarctica. On July 21, 2013, sensors on the Antarctic Plateau recorded a temperature of -93.2 degrees Celsius. That is not wind chill, that is actual air temperature. It was later revised to -94 degrees Celsius after further analysis of satellite data. At that temperature, human biology stops functioning. Inhaling the air would freeze your lungs solid. Exposed skin would freeze in seconds. Your eyes would freeze open. This is not a place anyone lives. It is barely a place anyone visits. The plateau is over 3,000 meters above sea level, covered in ice kilometers thick and swept by katabatic winds that make the cold even worse. There are no research stations here, no bases, no shelters. The few scientific teams that venture onto the plateau do so with extreme logistical support, heated vehicles, and evacuation plans that assume failure at every stage. The temperature was recorded by satellite and confirmed by data from automated weather stations. No human was present at the moment of measurement because no human could survive there long enough to take the reading manually. The cold is so extreme that standard thermometers do not work. Electronics fail, batteries die in minutes, metal becomes so brittle that it shatters under stress. The East Antarctic Plateau is the coldest place on Earth. It is colder than anywhere humans have ever built a permanent structure, colder than the winter poles of Mars, colder than most places in the outer solar system. It is a cold so absolute that it redefines what cold means. And it is not an anomaly. The plateau reaches these temperatures every winter. It just happens in a place so remote that no one is there to witness it. 15 places, 6 continents. Deserts that have not seen rain in millions of years, lakes that calcify animals on contact, valleys where nothing decays, cities poisoned by their own industry, and a plateau so cold that standing on it would kill you faster than falling into space. Which one was the most extreme to you? Tell us in the comments. And if you want to see where else on this planet humans do not belong, the next video will take you there.